Blog Talk Radio.
Hello everyone, this is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good morning. It's 7 o'clock here in the morning, Calgary, Alberta, Tuesday, August the 10th, and I'm happy to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, and it's a 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. Chat room is open if anybody would like to sit in there. Excuse me, I'm just having coffee, waking up, and just want to continue talking about codependency and narcissism, and found a couple of interesting websites with some good information on there, and I'm learning a whole lot from these shows. I sure hope everybody else is getting something out of it. I didn't know a whole lot about codependency and definitely don't know much about narcissism. And even though I've heard these terms over the course of my lifetime many times and have heard people say, oh, this person is narcissistic, or you're a narcissist, or, you know, you have these behaviors that are narcissistic, right? And I had no idea what it is, you know what I mean? So I thought I'd just take a look at it and pass it on as I'm looking at it and kind of going through it. And as it turns out, I can relate to quite a bit of the codependency stuff, especially growing up in a dysfunctional home. So, you know, some of it I relate to, some of it I don't, and some of it I can see other family members who sort of behave that way, those ways, you know, sort of codependent behaviors. And so it is quite interesting, and I hope other people are getting something out of this too. And I just want to remind everybody I'm not a counselor or therapist. I have no certificates in those areas. I'm just a private citizen who just pays to do these blog talk shows because I feel that you know, more people need to talk about this stuff. You know, abuse is so often just pushed under the carpet. No one wants to talk about it. It's not something that people find comfortable talking about. It's not something that people want to talk about on their lunch breaks, that's for sure, at work or sitting around after work, you know, in the pub, you know. Abuse is just something people don't want to deal with. But sadly enough, there's so many people who have suffered from abuse of all different kinds, right? Whether it's child abuse, domestic violence and abuse, sexual assault, you know, you name it, bullying on the school grounds, you know. People have experienced abuse, you know, and it's sad to say, but probably every single person on this planet has been abused at some time. I would not doubt that one bit. But we're talking about chronic, you know, we're talking about epidemic proportions of society being severely abused, you know, child abuse issues, domestic violence and assault, you know, domestic abuse. It's horrible. And so there's so many people out there suffering with this, and I know this. So that's why I'm a survivor. So I'm like, well, you know, I'll just bring out the information that I find very useful and helpful to myself while I'm studying it out and working through my healing journey. And then, because I'm very much still on my healing journey, I've been on it for 3 years now, and I'm in such a much better place now than I ever was before in my lifetime, so I'm very thankful to be in this position, and that's why I just wanted to be one more voice of hope for people out there who are suffering and really having a hard time, and just to say, you know, I'm just hoping that you will reach out and get some help, you know, not suffer in silence and not let yourself go, because, you know, we deserved so much better, and it all comes down to that, you know what I mean? As children growing up, if you were abused as a child, we deserved so much better, and we deserve it now. And I realized that 3 years ago. I talk about this quite a bit on my shows. That, you know, it's really up to us. Really, we have to reach out. We have to make the phone calls. Healing isn't just going to come and knock on the door and say, "Hey, I'm here to heal you." I wish that was the case, but it's not. And everything in life that we want, we have to go. We have to be proactive and search it out. It's not just going to fall in our laps, and I sadly had to realize that myself, and at the age of 41 decided to stop trying to kill myself and trying to think that I needed to be off this planet, and that I didn't deserve to be here, and I was just worthless and you know, useless and all this, and start believing in the fact that, you know, I deserve to be here and I'm a good person and I never deserved any of that garbage that was put on me as a child. And I deserve to have a good life, and the only way I'm going to get it is to do it myself and start searching it out, seeking it out. That's what happened 3 years ago. So I'm extremely happy to be here today and just to be able to tell people that, and, you know, hopefully help other people who are suffering in this horrific aftermath of abuse, you know, whether it's domestic violence, like I said before, or, you know, domestic abuse. So that's just so damaging, right? So that's why I do these shows, you know. And so you have to listen at your own discretion. As survivors, we can be triggered. So you have to know what would trigger you, and you have to know how you're feeling when you're listening to this stuff. If you're feeling very much weak and just not, like, able to cope or handle the material, you have to turn it off and get yourself to a happy, safe place, right? And if you're a young person under the age of 18, I just ask that you have someone listen to the show with you, so they can help you decide whether or not you should be listening to it. It is a scary topic, abuse, and most people, if they haven't heard a lot about it or haven't survived abuse, they might not understand a lot of the material that I'm reading through, and they might not understand, exactly what I'm talking about. So I think that young people should have someone listen to the show with them, and that way they can help you with questions and whatnot. And if you should have questions about what I'm talking about, right? So important. Because abuse is not mainstream. It's not talked about. Of course, 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 6 boys are being abused every day. And that's just the stats of what's being reported, So, it's higher than that, you know what I mean? It's absolutely ridiculous, and we have to stop this, right? So this is why I'm doing these shows. And thanks very much for being here. I really appreciate it. And we're going to look at today codependency and recovery. It's actually from a website called www.allaboutcounseling.com/codependency.htm. And this is called Codependency and Recovery from Codependent Relationships. And we finished up that other article pretty much yesterday morning. And so I wanted to take a look at this one and just kind of read through it. So I'll put the link in the chat room here, so people can click on it and bring this up if you like. And let me see here. Just get over to my chat room here, and I've got my good friend Gypsy Witch in the chat room here today. Good morning, my dear sweet friend from Australia. And this is great. I'm so glad you could be here. Actually, it's good morning for me, and it's good night for you. So let's say I just put that in the chat room. And codependency and recovery from codependent relationships. And I just want to go through this because growing up in a dysfunctional home, I really relate to this stuff. I can, I can just see it, Let's see, we'll just start right here. I'm just reading from this page, and it says, what is codependency? What's the definition? There are many definitions used to talk about codependency today. The original concept of codependency was developed to acknowledge the responses and behaviors people develop from living with an alcoholic or substance abuser. And it says a number of attributes can be developed as a result of those conditions. And they go on to say here, however, over the years, codependency has expanded into a definition which describes a dysfunctional pattern of living and problem-solving developed during childhood by family rules. So this is another way to look at codependent behaviors and codependency. Excuse me. It says, one of many definitions of codependency is a set of maladaptive, compulsive behaviors learned by family members in order to survive in a family which is experiencing great emotional pain and stress. Maladaptive is the inability for a person to develop behaviors which get needs met, and compulsive is a psychological state where a person acts against their own will or conscious desires in which to behave. And then sources of great emotional pain and stress: chemical dependency, chronic mental illness, chronic physical illness, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, divorce, hypercritical or non-loving environment. And so that's what they list there. And they said here, as adults, codependent people have a greater tendency to get involved in relationships with people who are partners, who are perhaps unreliable, emotionally unavailable, or needy. And the codependent person tries to provide and control everything within the relationship without addressing their own needs or desires, setting themselves up for continued unfulfillment. And that's interesting. It says even when a codependent person encounters someone with healthy boundaries, the codependent person still operates in their own system. They're not likely to get too involved with people who have healthy boundaries. And this, of course, creates problems that continue to recycle. If codependent people can't get involved with people who have healthy behaviors and coping skills, then the problems continue into each new relationship. So that's very interesting to me. It's adults, codependent people have a greater tendency to get involved in relationships with people who are perhaps unreliable, emotionally unavailable, or needy. And the codependent person tries to provide and control everything within the relationship without addressing their own needs and desires, setting themselves up for continued unfulfillment. That is so interesting to me. I see this in family members of mine, not so much in myself, but I totally see it in family members of mine. I very well might have some, some of these behaviors, but I maybe not even recognize it myself, but I know I see it in some of my family members who are totally like that, and I know my mom was a little bit like that. Says, how do I know if I'm codependent? Generally, if you're feeling unfulfilled consistently in relationships, you tend to be indirect. Don't assert yourself when you have a need. If you're able to recognize you don't play as much as others, or other people point out you could be more playful, things like this can indicate you're codependent. That's interesting. So it says, if you're feeling unfulfilled consistently in relationships, you tend to be indirect. Don't assert yourself when you have a need. And I recognize this actually in a lot of my family members. It says, what are the symptoms? Controlling behavior, distrust, perfectionism, avoidance of feelings, intimacy problems, caretaking behavior, hypervigilance, a heightened awareness for a potential threat or danger, physical illness related to stress. And it says, isn't everyone codependent? This is the next part here. There are some natural and healthy behaviors mothers do with children that look like codependency. Are people mutually interdependent on each other? It says, yes, there is perhaps a continuum of codependency that most people might fall on. Maybe this continuum exists because so many people are taught to be assertive, are taught not to be assertive, or to ask directly for their needs to be met. It says here, we probably can't say that though that everyone is codependent. Many people probably don't feel fulfilled because of other things going on in the system at large. So, I guess they're saying, at times people can look codependent, but not everybody's codependent. Suzanne Wilson Schaaf believes the whole society is addicted. The object of addiction isn't the important issue, but rather that the environment sets us up to be addicted to something. For instance, food, sex, drugs, power, etc. And she says here, if that is true, then all of us are either addicts or codependents. From this perspective, society produces a pattern making it hard not to be codependent. But it still doesn't change that we're not getting what we need and we're not feeling fulfilled. Then the question is, how do I become more fulfilled and feel better about myself and the life I'm living? And so I find this very interesting because I talk a lot about the situation with my mom and the marriage that she was in, married to a man who was pretty loveless. That relationship might not have started out that way, my parents, right, my mom and dad, but as time went on, my mom would quite often say, this is just a horrible existence for me, this marriage, this family, nobody loves me, and I'm not getting what I need, and she was just, we could all see it, and as children, we'd tell my mom, we'd be like, and because of the abusive situations that would arise there, we would tell my mom, to get out of the marriage, and my brothers were always doing that because they were a lot older than me, and they were always telling her that she should leave and get her own life and be her own person. She said she really felt like she was not even a person. She had lost herself. She had lost her identity, her own self-perception of who she was. I don't think she ever knew who she was because she was abused as a child horrifically and took a lot of the abuse on so that her siblings would not be abused. She was the oldest daughter. Actually, she was the oldest child in the family. And she tried to protect her siblings. She had 7. She was the oldest of 7 children, and so a lot of her siblings actually thought that she was their mother, and that because she was doing all the nurturing and all the looking after them, whereas my grandmother was just abusing everybody around there. My grandmother was a pretty sick woman. Like she abused like a whole bunch of orphans that came to live with her too. This is back in like the 1930s, and she was very sick, and I have no empathy for her, and I no love in my heart for that woman. But I don't think my mom ever really knew who she was, or what she needed, or what she wanted. She had never sat down and thought about, what do I want as a person? What do I need as a person on this planet? And so she became very bitter, you know what I mean, and very much a codependent person, as I can see here from the different material that we've been covering this last week and a half or so. It says, why do we become codependent? What causes it? It's widely believed we become codependent through living in systems, families, with rules that hinder development to some degree. The system, usually parents and relatives, has been developed in response to some problems such as alcoholism, mental illness, or some other secret or problem. General rules set up within families that may cause codependency may include, and they list a whole bunch of stuff here. I'll just read through these. It's not okay to talk about problems is one. Another one, feelings should not be expressed openly. Keep feelings to yourself. Communication is best if indirect. One person acts as messenger between two others, known in therapy as triangulation. Another one is be strong, good, right, and perfect. And another one they list here, make us proud beyond realistic expectations. Another one, don't be selfish. Another one, do as I say, not as I do. Another one, it's not okay to play or be playful. And the last one they list here, don't rock the boat. It says many families have one or more of these rules in place within the family, and these kinds of rules can constrict and strain the free and healthy development of people's self-esteem and coping. As a result, children can develop non-helpful behavior characteristics, problem-solving techniques, and reactions to situations in adult life. And I mean, I just look at this and I think, every family's got all kinds of weird, bizarre behaviors, but the thing is some of them are healthy and some of them are not. And, just looking back, I can only really talk about my family because I know, the way it was. And a lot, in so many families, I think it's the same way. It's not okay to talk about problems. I think that most people, sadly enough, don't want to talk about problems. They don't want to hear about it. Parents come home from work and they're tired and they're stressed out. They had to deal with a crazy boss all day or some sort of customer yelling in their face, and then they get kids that want to talk about something that's going on in the family that they're not happy about, and then before you know it, everybody's angry and grumpy and saying, we're not talking about it, we're not talking about it. You know what I mean? And I mean, I saw this in my own home. Nobody wanted to talk about it. Nobody, it was just, nobody wanted to sit down and try to solve anything together and say, we have to talk about this at some point. Let's set up a time where we can get a family discussion going. There was none of that in our home. As a matter of fact, it was like if, my mom was just very good at, saying, if you open your mouth one more time, I'm going to knock your head off, and that's the way I was treated. So basically, I didn't talk about anything with her, and until I got a lot older and was, sort of able to either run extremely fast or, talk my way out of it, which was I got pretty good at when I got older, just from being around her and knowing what to say to kind of calm her down or, to get her to mellow out a bit, right? So, this is the thing. We need to talk about our problems, and that's the whole issue, right? If we can't talk about them, we can't solve them. What we don't talk about, that's why I'm talking about child abuse. That's exactly why I'm talking about this whole issue regarding child abuse, human rights abuses, is because if we don't talk about it, it's not going to change. Nothing will change. We have to talk about it, and we got to figure out a way to solve it. So family members, right? My family does not want to talk about this stuff. Are you kidding me? Like my brother, once in a while, he'll mention something, and we don't talk anymore. Actually, we haven't talked for 3 years. But the thing is when we were talking before, he would quite often say stuff like, our parents should have been arrested. They were horrible people. And, even though it wasn't really, nobody wants to really blame my mom. She was actually my main abuser, right? So, I mean, I think they both should have been arrested. And he would, he agreed with some of the stuff, but he never wanted to talk about the whole issue, right? It's just better to keep it under the carpet. That's that whole, denial thing, right? And my sister as well. She'll mention certain things. She'll just be like, well, I don't want Dad to live with me. He's crazy, and he's too psychologically unstable for me, and I can't handle being around him. And yet she knows that I'm doing these shows, and yet she will not say, Lori, I'd really like to read your book. She knows I wrote a book, and maybe she's read it. I don't know. Maybe she doesn't care. But, within our own family, there's still a lot of dysfunction. There's still, nobody wants to talk about it. Well, there's only 3 siblings left and my dad, 4 people out of 7. Actually 4 people out of 9, because there was 7 children and 2 parents. That makes 9 people. So there's 4 of us left, and we're all still very much just holding on to this whole idea that, oh, life is good, it never happened, we all, we're all good and fine, and there's no problems, right? When we all know good and well that there's a whole lot of problems, and that we should have talked about it years ago, right? So this is the problem with that. It's not okay to talk about problems. My mom would just say that we're not talking about family problems. If you tell anybody, I will kill you. And if you choose to open your mouth, I'll knock your head off. I heard that pretty much every time I opened my mouth, if she didn't like what I had to say. And so, I just learned to not talk about this stuff, especially when I was young. But as I got older, with my friends who were abused, I grew up in a neighborhood that was pretty full of abuse, actually. A lot of my friends were abused, and I knew their situation at home, and we would talk about it. We'd sit at the park and talk about it, and we'd be like, this sucks, we shouldn't have to be, we don't deserve this, we're not bad, because some of my friends would be thinking that, they were so bad and they should just kill themselves. I mean, these were kids that I knew, and, I'd be like, no, you didn't deserve that. And they'd be like, well, neither do you. We would sit with each other and talk to each other and try to help each other out, right? And it was horrible. So, amongst ourselves we would chat, but within our own families, people just don't. And it's because they don't want to have to own up and face up to the fact that changes need to be made in their own behaviors. Even the kids. I mean, sometimes children and young people need to make a change, but so do the parents. But the parents are always just blaming the kids. Like my mom, for instance, I won't go too much into detail into this, but my mom was always threatening to throw me out. And actually, she used to sort of kick me out of the house, and, she wouldn't never say, well, if you come back in, I'll kill you. But what she would do is she'd just be like, get out, I don't care if you ever come back. And, of course, my feelings would be hurt, and I'd be off going to somebody's house to stay for the night, and I didn't want to be removed from my home. She would say quite often that she wanted to put me in foster care. This was when I was about around the age of 12, 13, 14. And she'd be like, I'm just so sick and tired of your attitude, and I'm throwing you in foster care. I don't care because I don't love you anyway, and I didn't want you. You're a rape child, and blah, blah, blah. And I had to listen to this all the time, right? It was very hurtful. And, I was thinking, yeah, out of all these kids, 7 kids, she's going to throw me out and put me in foster care because why? I wasn't even sleeping around. I was doing drugs. Now, that's fact. But I was not pregnant, I wasn't, some of these things that I saw some of these other people doing and, getting kicked out of their homes. And I thought, what am I doing? I mean, one time I asked her if I could go to a football game. Now, this is the truth. I just wanted to go to a football game with my friends and after school, a regular senior high school football game. And my mom threw a fit. You're a slut, you're a whore, you're just going to sleep around, blah, blah, blah. Of course, I had already been out doing drugs and partying at bikers' parties and sneaking out. And, I had already been out, and I was not a slut, So the whole thing is all of a sudden she's going to tell me I can't go to a football game. I just needed $5 to go, right? So she's like calling me names and telling me she's going to throw me out and saying that she was going to put me in foster care because I asked if I could go to a football game. My mother was crazy, you know what I mean? Absolutely crazy. But, it just hurt my feelings totally. I was like, I'm the only kid out of 7 that she wants to put in foster care and says that she hates because I was born out of rape, And I was determined to stay in that home because I was like, I'm a good kid, and I was probably one of the nicest people to her. I used to steal flowers from the neighbors' yards and cross the road and bring them home for her and put them in a jar. And, I really loved my mom, and for her to treat me that way was absolutely unacceptable. And so, that's the whole issue, right? This is the sort of thing. Parents don't want to admit that they have to straighten up their own behavior. They just want to push it on their children. You have to change the way you behave. You have to do this. You have to behave a certain way, but I don't. It's okay if I do all this stuff and don't behave properly, but you have to behave a certain way. And see, that's that whole do as I say, not as I do thing, right? And so that was my parents. They taught us how to behave a certain way and then abused us because we were behaving that way. So basically, they caused it, right? And so many people want to say, oh, no, it couldn't have been the parents, it had to be the kids. It's always the kid's fault. And you know what? It's never the kid's fault. It's never the kid's fault. Children learn from their parents. Everything that they will learn from the life that their parents create for them. And if the parents cannot create a stable, loving environment, then the children will not be stable and they will not be loving, right? We are a direct result of our parents. And the only thing I believe that keeps love in my heart is the fact that my brothers used to tell me they loved me. I had 2 brothers. Actually, one brother, Chess, who was murdered when I was 8 years old, he used to tell me he loved me, and he used to be like, you're such a good girl, and, you're a beautiful girl, and you just be good so Mom doesn't get mad at you. And, he was always on my side, always taking my side, stopping my dad from beating on me quite a few times. And he was always looking out for me. And he was such a loving person. He taught me love, my brother Chess. And, then there was another brother of mine, like Howard was kind of abusive towards me. He didn't have much to say. He was 7 years older than me and usually was slapping me around just because that's what he saw his parents doing, so that's what he was doing. And my other brother, Rob, even though I believe that, he was the one that sexually molested me, he actually used to say nice things to me too every now and then, and not sexual. He would try to be nice when I was little. Right? So they were my brothers. I just love my brothers dearly. My sisters weren't there for me, and period. So my sister, the sister that's next to me was actually very abusive towards me because my mom was. So sometimes I would say things I shouldn't because I had a bad foul mouth, and I would pick up words from my mom, I would pick up words from other people, and of course curse words, right? And then I would tell them to my sister, and my sister would beat me up. So she was just doing what my mom was doing, right? And she was keeping me very much under her thumb, and she was just 5 years older. It really wasn't her fault. She was very stressed out and high-strung and abused herself, so it was, not really necessarily her fault. But the thing is then I met a family that showed me love, and that family I write about in my book, and A Life of Death Redemption. And that family, they were so good to me. They acknowledged, and validated the abuse that I went through, and they told me, you did not deserve that. You're a good kid. I don't know why would a parent treat their child like that, especially because, you just don't deserve it. No child deserves it. You don't, no child does. So they were very specific on what they would tell me, and they'd say, you have to learn to love yourself. And this is when I was like 12, 13 years old. Well, actually not so much 12, but 13 and a half, 14, when I started when they actually found out that I had been, being battered and beaten on and abused, right? They were like, you have to find love in your heart. You have to find love for this world. You have to find God, and allow Him to move in your life, and move in your heart, You don't want to turn out like your parents. You know what I mean? So these people were very, very helpful. I did have some people in my life who, thank God, were there for me to show me what love is, because my parents sure didn't. So that's the whole thing. Parents don't want to talk about their problems, because that means they have to straighten up. So what dysfunctional parent who has a lot of mental problems, mental issues, psychological issues, anger management problems is going to want to talk about problems and straighten up? That's the whole problem with this whole thing. Abuse. It's a difficult thing for people to have to deal with. And so the next portion, we'll have to continue this. We'll finish this. Well, actually, we'll take a look some more at it tomorrow. But feelings should not be expressed openly. Keep feelings to yourself. This is another setup within families that may cause codependency, saying feelings should not be expressed openly. Keep feelings to yourself. This is another thing that so many people who have been abused have been through, right? Not able to express their feelings. They're not able to, to show what's going on inside of their heart. Out of fear and many other reasons, right? And then keeping feelings to ourselves, and that's where I was, for 41 years, keeping all this in. I had talked to a few people about it, but never really faced it myself, never took a hard look at it for everything that it was. I mean, I had done that in my 30s, but it had no effect. I wasn't feeling any healing from it. But at the age of 41 said, no, that's it. I deserve so much better. You know what I mean? I deserve to be feeling so much better. I did not deserve this. No child deserves this, right? So, if you've been there and you've been suffering and you've suffered from this kind of stuff, just know, that you deserve so much better. And that, this abuse was not our fault. It's not. The shame does not belong to us. The shame belongs to the abuser, the person that hurt us, or the people that have hurt us. That's who the shame belongs to, not us. It was not our fault, and you see that so often, like, people just think, oh, I don't have to listen to that, that's just so stupid, it's not our fault and all this. It's true, right? I mean, we don't cause this sort of thing to happen. Children cannot be responsible for this. It's the caregivers, the parents' responsibility. So, when my family members don't like the fact that I blame my parents for this stuff, and you know what? I don't care, because it was their fault. And I'm going to continue to say that until the day I die. It was my mom's fault and my dad's fault, the destruction of our family, and I refuse to say anything different. That's the truth. So I'm not going to sugarcoat it and candy coat it and make it look all good like the rest of my family would like to see happen. It was their fault, and they really had some serious problems, and they passed them on to their children. And, that's not right at all. So make sure you do reach out. Keep looking for that hope. Keep looking for that help wherever you can find it, right? And we have about a minute left. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll be back on tonight with Janelle Matula, our newest South Central Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio here on Blog Talk Radio, www.blogtalkradio.com/Dreamcatchers. So catch Janelle Matula and myself tonight, 10 o'clock, and it's going to be a great show, really awesome show, and I just love Janelle. She's an awesome lady. She's an advocate, and she is big time out there trying to help people who have survived child abuse and trying to stop child abuse, first of all, and domestic violence and abuse. I hope you will tune into her show here on Blog Talk Radio as well. So tune in, and, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much. I'll just keep you guys in my heart. I just thank you for everything. Thanks for being here with me on this journey, and I really appreciate all your support. And, if you need something, get a hold of me on Blog Talk Radio and Facebook and whatnot. I'll be around. And have a great day, everybody. We'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.